So, am I to imagine that you would rank, if you had to rank top three in season one of DS9, Emissary would be in that count?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that it's an easy one, but quite frankly, you can't talk about the early seasons of DS9 without mentioning it. I think it's one of the finest episodes of DS9 ever, and I think it's one of the finest episodes of Trek ever, and that's Duet, which is the second to the
Yeah,
last episode
yeah,
of season one. So Duet would definitely make the list. I do think Emissary does. It's hard because there are so many others that I really enjoy as well. In the Hands of the Prophets, I love Battle Lines, Vortex, Dax. I think Dax is a phenomenal episode for so
you're
many
just
reasons. I think
naming
it's
all the episodes now, Sam. You're just naming all the episodes in the season.
well, that's the thing, right? Though that's the amazing thing about the first season of DS9. When anyone tries to say that DS9, first season was rough, or oh, they didn't really hit their stride until later, or whatever, I can immediately, off the top of my head, without having to look at anything, I can immediately say Emissary, Past Prologue, Man Alone,
Yeah,
Captive Pursuit, Dax. In the Hands of the Prophets, Duet, like right off the bat, I can name those episodes. Battle Lines, Vortex, like I mean, I'm naming like half the season already, and it's
yeah,
just sort of
yeah.
like, what are you talking about? The season's amazing.
Yes,
So,
there's so many good episodes, and I would agree that Duet, and for those of you who don't know every episode by name, this is the episode. Uh, like you said, it's toward the end of the season, and it features, and this general story has been seen elsewhere, where you've got this Cardassian who may or may not be this war criminal, this infamous war criminal, and so it is it's a very psychological episode. And again, this is not an episode where they're going off to some strange world and they're meeting these new, they have this emergency to contend with. This is an episode that takes place a lot on the station, and it's about character dynamics and scenes, and it's kind of it plays like a play in a lot of ways
it
in
does. It
many parts.
absolutely does. Yes.
Yeah, and so the strength of a lot of the performances, I think, helped to carry this episode, and of course, a really great script.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I mean,
it's quite good.
None of Visitor is just phenomenal in the episode. I
Yes,
love a lot of what she does throughout the first season. I think that she really rises to the occasion numerous times throughout the course of the first season in particular, and I think kind of rises towards the top of like can't miss performances when it comes to the show. But in this episode, she's amazing. Harry Yulin, I believe, is the name of the actor who plays Maritza, or is he? And
right. Yes, or is he?
he's absolutely phenomenal as well. Odo gets some great stuff to do. Ducat has some stuff, some amazing. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like we've talked a lot about the show, but we haven't even gotten the chance to even talk about some of the indelible characters that we're introduced to, in the first season alone. There are others that come later on down the road that maybe we'll get to in future episodes, but in the first season alone, we meet Garrick, we meet Ducat, we meet, you know what I mean? Like we get some of these amazing folks. We meet the Negus, we meet, we've got just so many richly layered guest characters in addition to our richly layered main cast.
Right.
So yeah, it's really hard for me to narrow it down to three. I think if I absolutely had to back against the wall, I might say Duet, In the Hands of the Prophets, and Emissary. But then I feel bad because I'm leaving out Past Prologue, which I really love. Um, I like Battle Lines a lot. I think
Battle
Battle
Lines is
Lines,
very good, and of course, again,
yeah,
Dax. Because you're sort of really
yep.
setting up Dax's character in that episode and asking
And
these big questions too.
right? I
Yeah,
think that Dax is an episode that honestly, in some ways, feels almost more relevant now than it did 30 years ago,
yeah,
which is incredible.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Amazing, right?
right. So I've given a non-answer basically. You could be the better of the two of us. What are your top five?
Well, I think Emissary is such a strong pilot, and I would say that yeah, it's probably in terms of this era of Trek the best of them to set up the world in a really engaging way and to build on the franchise that has come before it. And I actually really enjoy Broken Bow, the Enterprise pilot as well, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't score as high for me as Emissary. And then very similar to what you said, I think Duet is not just a standout episode in the season, but a standout episode in the series.
Yeah.
and really kind of shows toward the end of season one the kind of psychological stories that that the world that they've created can hold. Um, and I do want to talk about In the Hands of the Prophets because
Yeah.
I feel like that episode doesn't get as much praise as it should.
Yeah.
I think that episode is phenomenal. And again, to your point, I feel like in our era today, this has so much resonance. And if
Yeah.
again, if you're not familiar with the episode, it is basically the plot hinges on the fact that um, the school on DS9 is teaching, and it's Keiko O'Brien who's the teacher in the school. Wynn, who is the uh, one of
Look,
the
all you need to know is she's played by Louise Fletcher, who was Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, for which she won an
yes,
Oscar, mind you.
yes,
And that's just I can just I feel like anyone who knows One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Ratched, like you're good now. Like
there
that's
it
all you
is.
need to know about Beta
She
Quinn.
she is phenomenal throughout this show,
She is
and she's particularly
phenomenal.
good in this episode as a religious cleric from Bajor who takes umbrage with the fact that this station is teaching basically science versus the religious beliefs of her people.
Yeah,
And she starts this protest
creationism.
and erupts in violence aboard the station. And so, certainly, like, I can't imagine anything speaking more pertinently to our times,
Yeah.
as I feel like we more and more are encountering issues like this, in the United States and all around the world. And I just feel like it's just another way that this show is, for lack of a better term, is such a Star Trek show
Mm-hmm.
where it can take these situations from our lives and our world and in the best way create these parallels in this science fiction environment that
Yeah.
will allow us, and again, not like a preachy way or anything like that at its best, but it forces us to think about the world around us from a different perspective in a different way, and hopefully in that way give us more clarity in the world around us. So yeah, I love that
Well,
episode. I think it's great.
and I'll throw something else out there real quick too that I think it bears saying, because I know that there are people who love DS9 and do not like the character of Keiko O'Brien. But I think Rosalind Chow is phenomenal in this episode. And I
Yeah,
love the way that she's written so strongly, and the fact that she's unwilling to budge when a lot of people, even at times O'Brien seems kind of like, okay, go, whatever. But like she's steadfast in her beliefs of what she's teaching and why she's teaching them and why they deserve to have this education. And it's really lovely. And I just think that everyone in this episode is fantastic, and there's just some really really incredible moments. It's an incredibly tense episode. The
yeah,
other thing that I love about it is that it pays off so many of the tensions that have been building basically since Emissary,
right.
and threads that have been woven in through a number of episodes, um, and leads to the season 2 opener, which is not a two-parter, but a three-parter.
What?
And let me just tell you, when I watched it as it aired, I was simultaneously frustrated because it's like, what? I gotta wait,
He
but at the
continued
same time,
again?
blown away by the fact
Yeah,
that they were taking this chance and doing, you had, like, they're telling this a story that's this big. And while I firmly agree with the criticism that while the first two episodes are really really good, that the third doesn't quite deliver as well as it could, maybe on the premise of the previous two. Although I do think that there are elements of the third. Part of what happens is I feel like there's this element of Star Trek in general. We talk about the great Star Trek reset button, where especially in the original series and next gen, pretty much nothing could happen that you couldn't just wrap up at the end of the episode and move on. And if you'd never seen the previous episode, you were fine. Outliers, of course, to that would be like Best of Both Worlds, which you've got not only those two episodes, but then you've got the episode after where Picard goes back to the family
family.
venue
Yeah,
and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, but anyway, I do feel like there was like there's almost this tension of like how far can we really pull this, and how much do we really need to wrap up at the end of the third episode. And I feel like
Yeah.
they might have pushed themselves to wrap things up just a little too quickly at the end of the third. Whereas the neat thing is later in the show they would definitely leave threads dangling and not be so afraid of tying everything up at the end of a
Right.
two-parter or whatever, or in the case
Yes.
of like season 7, a seven-parter, which literally the first 7 episodes of like the 7th season are basically one long epic episode.
Right.
um
Exactly. Right.
but yeah, I think that it was just really cool storytelling and very something new for Trek by kind of having this story weave through the first season, culminate in the finale, and then yet spill out into the first 3 episodes of the next season.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, it's a really gutsy move. Um, and and I don't know if I don't know where they get the guts to do that in the opening of the second season. If it has to do
Right.
with the show being syndicated, I'm not sure, but it's so great to feel that kind of scope so early on in the show, and the storytelling in it too. And it's action oriented, but it also has to do with it has these elements of suspense and mystery and espionage, and
Yeah.
it's really great. And you've got an incredible guest performance in those episodes, because that's Frank Langella in those episodes, right? Am I
That's
thinking
right.
about that? Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. So kind of a heavy hitter pretty early on there, which is great. Yeah, those are standout episodes in season two. I do want to shout out one more episode in season one,
Please.
uh, I don't think you mentioned the episode Progress. Do you remember this episode?
You have got to be kidding me. I was just getting ready to talk about that episode too, because I
Okay.
wanted to talk about an underrated episode. That's perfect, JJ. Yes, please talk about
Yeah,
Progress.
I think it's an extremely underrated episode. It's another episode that really lays the groundwork for Bajor and for Kira, and
Yes.
really, I think sort of the central conflict for Kira Nerys throughout the show is that she is this former freedom fighter who has, for all intents and purposes, won the war, and now she has to learn to live in this world in which she's expected to help you know civilization thrive. And so you have this
Yeah.
perfect confluence of events in this episode where she's basically has to go down to this planet and try and mediate a situation where she's got to take farm equipment away from somebody so that they can do something else with it. And it feels like it's this small, intimate story, but it has such larger ramifications and repercussions, and it's just incredibly well done. And it's a lot of it is hinges on the performances of the folks in the episode. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts, because I think that it's just, again, it's one of those episodes that it's like this sleeper episode, but it says so much without having to do a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I one of the things that I want to mention right off the bat is that Brian Keith gives just a wonderful guest performance
yeah,
in the role of Mullibok, and
playing the farmer. Yeah,
the farmer, yeah, that Kira bonds with and everything. And to me, it's funny because at this point in time, I'd seen him in a few things, probably most memorable at that young age in the original Parent Trap. With
okay,
Haley Mills, he plays the
right.
father, and so it was fun for me in a way because it's like, oh, I know that guy, and
Yeah,
and then getting to
right.
see him in this episode, and there's something very effortless about his performance, which is wonderful. And unfortunately, it would be one of the last things that he ever did, because within a year or two, I believe, he took his own life. But the relationship that's built between he and Kira over the course of the episode is so lovely and fairly low key, like you said, compared to some of the other big types of things that we have happen throughout the course of the season. I also love, as divided as they could be, as as much as they could play against one another throughout the course of the series, the cast, the main crew, if you will, really comes together beautifully in this episode. And I love the way that Cisco especially has Kira's back. Because
Yeah,
throughout the course of the first season, especially, we see moments where Cisco kind of has to like tell Kira what's up. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Right.
kind of have to be like, there's even this beautiful moment in Emissary where at the very beginning, when he first meets her, she's like, "You've come to take my office," and he's like, "Oh no, I thought I'd come and say hi, and then I'd take your office." And it's this
Yeah.
lovely moment where it's just sort of
Right.
like, "Oh, he's nice. Oh no, he's letting her know,"
Yeah.
and yet in this episode he purposely like delays so she can have extra time. Bashir helps to cover for her. There's just some really wonderful moments, I think, with the rest of the cast that I really enjoy as well. But
Yeah.
overall, I mean, you already hit on it. The fact is that this tells a very important story to the fabric of the entire series,
Yeah.
especially about, who the Bajorans are, what they fought for, how
Right.
they fought for it, what
Right.
that means in the context of the whole. And I think that we see that crop up a lot throughout the course of the series,
Right.
especially in these early seasons, because there are some brilliant episodes that deal with that. Duet being another one, for instance, that deal with the fallout from this conflict.
Right.
And again, we'd never really seen stuff like that. I mean, we'd seen some stuff with like the Klingons, and there'd been like some the Klingon Romulan stuff in the was it Redemption, I believe, two-parter
Mm.
with Worf.
Right.
We'd seen a little bit of that sort of strain, which again, that was Ron Moore, who again now is working on this show as well.
Mhm.
And so I think that to see the way that this conflict played out, and to see what happens with these, you know, for lack of a better term, these sort of extremist viewpoints that the
Right.
Bajorans, had to basically use in order to win this war against the Cardassians.
Yeah, I mean, you have Kira who will, she's at some point she will actually own the term terrorist because
Yeah,
that was, I mean, given what they were experiencing under occupation, it's like these were the tools that we had, and
right.
like, okay, so this is airing on like the WB. All right,
Right.
um,
But again, even from the get go, and this is the reason why I gave so much credit and praise to Emissary earlier as far as setting things up, is even in the very beginning, the first time we ever see Kira, she is arguing with the bureaucracy, the Bajoran bureaucracy about, we fought, I did not fight my whole life, to just give all, to give the yoke over to a new master, basically.
right,
And,
right,
with that potentially being the Federation. And,
right,
and she's very blunt, about some of these things. Right. And,
right,
and again, I just, I love that aspect of the character. And I love also where she goes and what she
right.
grows into, and the
The
evolution of the
entire
character as
journey
well. But
because you're,
this, but
sorry,
I
go
think
ahead.
that progress. No, just to wrap that up, I do think that progress is a wonderful moment for that first kind of light dawning for Kira in a
Yes,
way, and it really provides this wonderful springboard for a lot of what's to come for her character. Again,
right,
with Duet, In the Hands of the Prophets, the three-parter that opens season 2,
yeah.
her character just already is evolving and going some great places.
Right. Yeah, and just the realization that by the end of the episode, Cisco kind of has to thrust on her, which is like, "Hey, you're not the underdog here. Like
Yeah,
you've lived your entire life as the underdog, and now you're something else, and you have to be in this role now because you are needed in this way. It's not you spent your whole life fighting. Now you have to. It's like it's you're mediating, you're doing all these other things, these really hard tasks, and but again, like you said, like I have your back, but this is what needs to happen. This is your life now.
yeah.
You can't just give it all up and
Yeah, I mean, and
let
it,
this
and it,
guy
it it's heavy.
stay on his
That's the
farm.
other thing. DS9
So
is
yeah,
never
it's
afraid to
yeah,
to
I
to,
think that's
to
a really standout episode.